Since the late 19th century, human civilization has existed exclusively within the confines of deep space colonies, scattered across star systems hundreds of light years from our origin. Our exodus in the 1850s was driven by a total atmospheric collapse, a disaster fueled by a surge in runaway nanotechnology that rendered the planet's air supply lethal. This historical simulation displays the data we've relied on for centuries, a planetary map of Earth obscured by dense, perpetual storm systems and designated as a series of high-level ecological hazard zones. For 320 years, the consensus was absolute. Earth was a dead world, a toxic graveyard that was permanently closed to human life. That consensus was shattered when a listening station detected a coherent radio signal. It wasn't a solar flare or a natural echo. The frequency and modulation pointed directly back to the surface of our abandoned home. The Colonial Council launched an immediate investigation, commissioning the Odyssey, a specialized vessel carrying 6 experts in exobiology, physics, and history. While the mission was publicly framed as an effort to recover lost historical data, the crew was privately tasked with identifying the source of the transmission. They arrived expecting to find the ruins of a collapsed world, only to discover that 3 centuries of scientific data had failed to predict the reality waiting for them in orbit. As the Odyssey cleared the moon's shadow, the crew found a planet that looked entirely different from their simulations. Earth was vibrant, cloudless, and glowing with deep blues and greens. This telemetry chart reveals expected toxic red bars plunging as actual oxygen-rich green bars spike. Overlaying a topological map shows dense forests reclaiming every landmass, an artificial expansion far beyond typical biological timeframes. The planet's condition is statistically impossible for a world that suffered total collapse. Rather than slowly healing, Earth has reached a state of artificial perfection that suggests it is being actively maintained. To investigate, the crew landed the Odyssey in the center of what was once a major metropolitan hub, expecting to find the skeletal remains of a city. Instead, they found towering skyscrapers and vast suspension bridges that showed absolutely no signs of rust or erosion, or the structural decay that should have occurred after 300 years of exposure to the elements. Even in a vacuum, the preservation of these materials would be difficult to explain. On a planet with a high oxygen atmosphere, the lack of weathering makes the city feel less like a ruin and more like a carefully kept exhibit. This level of physical integrity contradicts every historical record of a planet-wide disaster. The infrastructure didn't just survive, it was kept from aging. On the ground, the forensic details are even more unsettling. The crew slowly walked past lines of perfectly parked cars, their tires still inflated and paint completely pristine. They found residential doors wide open, with no evidence of forced entry, absolutely no signs of physical struggle, and no indication anyone ever fled. This forensic view of a local residence shows undisturbed plates and silverware still sitting on a dining table. The scene suggests a sudden interruption of daily life, as if the occupants were present one second and gone the next. But the crew couldn't find a single trace of those occupants. There are no remains, no skeletal fragments, and no biological degradation markers in the soil or the dust. Billions of people didn't die out or leave on ships. They were removed from the environment entirely, leaving behind a world that remains biologically vacant despite being perfectly habitable. As night fell over the metropolis, the silence of the city became absolute. There was no wind, no insect life, and no sound from the surrounding forests. Driven by the sense that the city was too quiet, the crew recalibrated their sensor suite to scan for thermal signatures rather than visible light. Thermal feeds revealed hundreds of human-shaped heat signatures pacing inside the dark buildings. While scanners detect constant movement, those same floors remain completely empty to the naked eye. The sensors track entities with physical temperature, but no visible form. The discovery changed the nature of the mission. The crew wasn't exploring an empty world. They were standing in a city densely populated by something they couldn't see. This suggests that Earth's pristine condition was a deliberate choice. The planet wasn't a healing ecosystem. It was a cage designed to keep these invisible signatures contained and sustained. The oxygen-rich air and the preserved cities were the infrastructure required to keep these entities alive and waiting for over 3 centuries. The original transmission was a lure. Sending a deep space signal triggered the exact protocol to bring a human crew back to the surface. By answering that call, the Odyssey provided the one thing this invisible population lacked: a way off the planet. Humanity didn't return to solve a mystery. They provided the catalyst for a threat that had been waiting 300 years for a ride home.